Hello, how are you? Hey, Houston, how are you? It's Mr. McKinney here with Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston. Excited once again for our every single Wednesday show we do here at 7 o'clock, live from the Heritage Society with Mr. McKinney. Got some really great guests tonight with you. We always start our show with our favorite guest on the show. Of course, I'm talking about Allison Bell, our Executive Director. We have Steve Curry coming joining us. Stephen Curry's going to be with us later on in the show, so you do not want to miss out, the man you're here to see. But we got to make sure we get an update on the Heritage Society. So Allison Ayers Bell, how are you, the Executive Director? Here she is.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that picture.
That was a great photo, by the way. That's Robert Sakowicz joined us on the show about 2 weeks ago. It was a pleasure having him here, and you can check out that video on the YouTube channel. We'll talk about that a little later on, where you can find us on that. But you've got a great report for us, and actually we had a really fun evening at this awesome space. You can talk a little bit about that. What happened on Thursday?
That was our first in a while, our SIP, which stands for See Interesting Places, and we were at the Albert Thomas Convention Center.
Yeah.
And we had a speaker who educated us about all of the important things that Albert Thomas did for the city of Houston. So it was really fun. He was
a great speaker. Who was our speaker?
Oh, a guy named Chris Bell.
Oh, the one and only Chris Bell, former U.S. Congressman, and actually connects the dots because Albert Thomas. We had to pay him a lot. Some wine and cheese. Yeah, he was a good time. But he was great, though. People loved hearing about the history. Just an example of what we do here at the Heritage Society. Always going to find a fun way to incorporate history and also have some great bites.
Yeah.
And the space was beautiful. We don't have any photos from the space here, but describe it.
It's a huge ballroom, and so we were able to socially distance. We went out on these fabulous balconies. It was a full moon. We spread out all across the place, and we kept, it was a very safe event, and everyone had a really good time.
A great time. It was wonderful, and thank you to Kirksey Gregg for offering that space. And we'll talk more about Kirksey Gregg in a second. So thanks to the folks who helped out with SIP, and we're there part of that. Okay, we always talk about this because it's still going on until, of course, March 31st. Talk about
Sure. The Women Cast Their Ballots is our exhibit featuring Houston women who participated and were very involved in the suffrage movement from back when it began until more recent times. We have some trailblazers even from just up until recently. We have wonderful artifacts that have been donated or that are on loan to us in the exhibit. And then, of course, if you're not comfortable coming down, you can do a virtual tour, only $5, and you can go to our website, look for the word virtual tour, and you can walk through here and blow up every panel. It's really, really interesting.
It's very detailed. It's by our awesome volunteer, Lisa Carey, who's also on the committee to help put this together. And as Allison Bell said, you can actually pinch in the photo and see the detail of some of the exhibit items. In fact, there's Julia Idison's wonderful dress on loan from the San Jacinto Museum. So we're always collaborating with other nonprofits out there, loaning our stuff to them. They're loaning their stuff to us. So that's a great way to showcase the folks over the San Jacinto Museum and the work they do over there. Now, there's another event. We don't have a slide for it, though, but another event is coming up. Before we go to prizes real quick, what's happening? It was just kind of really, you're going to hear more about it coming up in the next couple of weeks. We're so excited.
A slide. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
A slide. So we are.
It's on our website, though, by the way. It's all up and running.
That's right. A holiday market. It's going to be December 11th, 12th, and 13th. It's a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We are going to have, of course, it's going to be outdoors in Connolly Plaza, which is right behind us here in the studio. Everybody will be spread out. We will definitely practice the safe COVID measures by temperature check and masks. And we're hoping to have a lot of vendors. As you may have heard, the Nutcracker market was canceled this year, I believe, and a lot of vendors had already purchased their items. So I think we're going to get hopefully a lot of those wonderful vendors to come be outside.
And the price is right. Talk about the price real quick.
Sure, it's just $10 entry fee. And if you want to be a vendor, we have that. I believe that's on our website as well. And the preview night on Friday is just $20. And it'll be really fun. We have lots of great ideas.
And and like all nonprofits at the Heritage Society, we're also finding out ways to stay relevant, but also raise funds and adapt during this time period. So we also like to mention year-end gifts because it's an opportunity. If you're in a situation where you need to give a gift because you normally give gifts throughout the year, but obviously things have changed, there's an opportunity to support the Heritage Society because we've been around since 1954, and we need your support now more than ever. So just be thinking about things like that. If you can't make the holiday market, maybe there's a way you can give donate from your house, support the Heritage Society and 501c3 nonprofits. Those things are coming up. We're already in November now. It's only about a month away, so just be thinking about that. Supporting one of your favorite nonprofits. It really has been focusing on preserving Houston's past, for 66 years. So there you go.
So more on our website. It says Candlelight Market. So it's sort of a takeoff on our candlelight that we've had for so many years. So we're real excited to change it up a bit.
This is great. Okay, let's talk about prizes. The folks have been waiting for right now. Prizes. What's our very first question? Let's see. Here it is. Oh, for those who watch Gary White, I forgot to mention Gary White because he was phenomenal last week. He took us on a journey through Houston cemeteries, and we really appreciate him doing so. So these questions are from the lecture that we had last week. So if you paid attention, then you're able to win some prizes, and people did chime in. Let's see. There's Gary White, of course. Longtime docent with the Heritage Society as well.
He was so interested. Who was here that said that they'd learned so much, and they...
Oh, people that chimed in?
Yes.
I'm not too sure, but what's great, though? We like to find ways to feature our board members, our docents, and people that care about the Heritage Society. So get involved. You can always volunteer, by the way. We're always looking for folks to volunteer with the Heritage Society. Your time, your talent, whatever you want to help make the Heritage Society better. So there we go. Thank you to Gary White for joining us. But the very first question is...
What is the name of the person who has a monument in both Japanese and English at Hollywood Cemetery? And the hint, it's connected to rice farming.
So once again, what is the name of the person who has a monument in both Japanese and English at Hollywood Cemetery? And as Allison mentioned earlier, it connects to rice farming. Okay, what's the answer?
The answer is Makawa.
Yeah.
Is that how you say that?
Makawa, yeah, Makawa. And it's been changed. The name the spelling was changed to the current day Makawa Road that we know. So it used to be, yes, he talked about that too. So you can look at his best. So who's the winner?
It's a great story. Jean Deal.
Jeannie Deal won. Jean Deal, look at that.
You know her, right?
Yeah, I do know her. She's an awesome lady and sweetheart.
You can deliver her gift.
I can deliver her gift. I'd be happy to. There we go. So check that out. So great, congratulations. I know she's watching tonight because she talked earlier.
That's
so great.
Right. She was excited. She won last week too. All right.
Second question.
Who was Jean Tierney's first husband? And I don't have the answer because she just. You might have to. Do you recall who the answer?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
But nobody got it right there.
Right, that's why she didn't.
Okay, TP Lee. Okay, there we go. Nobody got it right. Okay, so that's the answer, Mr. Lee. Yeah, nobody got it right. It was her second husband, I believe. So there we go. All right, next question.
Okay. Glendale Cemetery was what before it was Glendale Cemetery over on the East End?
Okay, who's got the question? Who's got the answer?
The answer is Harris.
And
Harrisburg,
the
winner is Jeannie Deal again.
Whoa, she got two questions right. Okay, good job, Jeannie Deal. Jeannie Deal got it right. Okay, so let's go to the fourth question. Here we go.
What is the oldest African-American cemetery in the city?
Okay. What's the answer?
She didn't tell me.
Oh, she did. Alana didn't. Well, he talked about it, okay? He talked about his Olivewood.
There was not a winner.
Yeah, there wasn't a winner anyway, but he talked about Olivewood being the oldest African-American cemetery. Yes, okay, so there you go.
Nobody won that one.
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's a famous one.
Okay.
All right.
Last question.
Last question. How many cemeteries were in Sam Houston Park, right here in our backyard?
This is an easy one. What's the answer?
2.
2. He talked about this. Gary White talked about it in detail. The Masonic Cemetery and the Episcopalian Cemetery were on this property in the northern Sam Houston Park area along where we're at now. So there you go. Well, those are all the 5. The winner. Who's the winner?
Marcia Lutz.
Marcia Lutz won.
Marcia Lutz is collecting a box of prizes because she wins.
Yeah, she has a library courtesy of the Heritage Society. I love it. That's okay.
Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you, Marcia, and thank you to Allison Bell for joining us and giving us great updates about the Heritage Society.
Thank you.
We do appreciate it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well, we're going to get going. By the way, I want to mention our studio. We mentioned Kirksey Greg earlier, but I want to do a little twirl around, and you can kind of see a little bit of what we have here. So I'll show you the studio real quick. This is all, once again, courtesy of Kirksey Greg. You can check it out. I'll come over here now, and here's our space. I'll turn this on. Okay. All right. So we've got a couple more slides that we're going to do because we want to talk about a few more things here at the Heritage Society. Let's see. Okay. Thank you again, by the way, to Gary White. I want to make sure we thank Gary White for joining us and for helping us out here, by doing the cemetery talk that we had earlier, which was last week. So thank you again to Gary White for taking us on a journey through historic cemeteries. Again, you can find this talk on our YouTube page. Next week, by the way, next Wednesday, November 11th at 7 o'clock, we have with us a very special guest, Her name is Priscilla T. Graham, and she is an author that focuses on the African-American experience here in Houston, the history of Houston African-American settlements, not just in Houston, but also in Texas. And she's here on on November 11th because she's also a veteran of war. So we want to make sure we honor her, but also let her tell her story about her. She has like 30 books that she's written on the African-American experience within Texas. She travels to different areas of our state and tells these stories in a series of books that she has. So we're looking forward to having Priscilla T. Graham join us next Wednesday, November 11th, okay? All right. Hey, this is a fun thing that we did. So speaking of HoustonMod, because our guest coming up shortly is going to be Stephen Curry, HoustonMod and Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston and Star Massing over with Boulevard Realty did a really fun sneak peek inside this mid-century house of a well-known architect that I know that Mr. Curry's going to talk about a little later on, Alan Williams. But this house, the whole inside of the house is available on Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston YouTube channel. So if you want to see what the inside of this house looks like, go onto our YouTube channel. You'll be able to see that, okay? Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston on YouTube. And speaking of YouTube, if you've missed last week's show and even the week before, Robert Sakowitz, we talked about him earlier, you missed that show. Well, guess what? You've got a chance to see him. If you missed Sandra Lord, our awesome buddy Sandra Lord came on the show and talked about the ghosts of Houston's Market Square Park, her newest book. And speaking of new books, by the way, are rather old books, but new authors coming into us, talking to us, new friends rather. This is a book we're going to talk about. It's our very last show that we have. It's called Rails Around Houston. You've seen the book around in bookstores. It's been out for a while now, but we're going to have with us Douglas Weisskopf. He's going to be talking about Rails Around Houston as one of our last guests that we have on the show, okay? So do not miss out that show. It's going to be wonderful. It's our very last show on November 18th, and he'll tell you why on November 18th we're going to be meeting with him on that day. Okay. Mentioned YouTube earlier. Make sure you go to the Heritage Society's YouTube page. We don't have that many subscribers, so we need you to chime in. Make sure you like and follow and subscribe to our Heritage Society YouTube page, okay? So you can see all the great videos, including videos about architecture. You've got live videos on there, too, the show that we do. We've got history tours on the videos. We've got African-American history on the videos as well. So like I said, you do not want to miss out on your Houston History Fix when you like and follow the Heritage Society on YouTube. Okay. Speaking of following and liking, make sure you like and follow Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston and the Houston History Bus. We always appreciate when you do this because you'll learn about fun things that we're doing within the historical community. We're always promoting other projects people are doing as well. We like to share information, let people know how they can love Houston history as much as we do. So there you go, Mr. McKinney's Historic Houston. And we offer free tours, of course, on board the Houston History Bus, which we always recommend people learn about Houston history in a fun and creative way. So please come join us on board the History Bus. You can always call us at 713-364-8674 if you want more information about the bus. We've got River Rose Christmas Light tours coming up, so it's really exciting and a fun way to learn about Houston history, okay? All right. Once again, that's all the information you need right there, and we're getting close to Steve Curry. He's coming on soon. Let's bring him out. How about that? So let's bring out Stephen Curry. Come on out, buddy. Here he is. Yay. Thank you, sir. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to give you the mic. That's your mic.
Thank you.
Okay. So Stephen Curry is an architect. He is also an avid preservationist, and he happens to be the president for HoustonMod, correct?
Correct.
Awesome. So tell folks a little bit about HoustonMod. Or I'll let you take the clicker.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead. You do the clicker, and I'll point. I think it'll work out well. So HoustonMod is an organization that advocates for what we call our recent history. For the legacy of mid-century modern is a term that's handy now to use. You hear it a lot. But it's basically talking about the architecture of the post-war era, post-World War II era. So the last half of the 20th century.
And that's kind of where Houston really just explodes. I mean, we've had growth spurts since 1836, since we started, but really, when you look at our freeways and all our subdivisions, they all have a common, connection. It's around that time period.
Right, that's right.
You know?
That's right.
Well, I'll let you talk about these points.
So HoustonMod advocates in a number of ways. We tours, special events, with book publications that we support various authors, and especially ways to collaborate. We're sort of the second generation of leadership in HoustonMod. It started in 2003. And so now we've grown up a little as an organization. The city's grown up a little bit. I think preservation is seen in a new light. And there's collaboration opportunities locally between our organizations. So we're looking for things to do all the time with Preservation Houston, with AIA Houston, and regionally with Preservation Texas, with some of the other mid-century preservation organizations across the state, including RGV, Rio Grande Valley Mod is a new organization that we collaborate with. So we don't have Mr. McKinney's bust tonight, but let's take a little tour. If we'll go back one slide,
Sure.
that's a tour of a remarkable house in Dallas. E.D. Stone's son, Hicks Stone, was on a book tour, and he was here in Houston, and we sort of rode his coattails in to see this great house in Dallas that I think none of us had seen before. So that was a remarkable opportunity to go to Dallas together. And then the next slide that we'll go to, that's a pre-mod, certainly not a modern building, but we saw fantastic things when we were in Beaumont. And that's our intrepid frequent tour leader, Stephen Fox, there on the left in the dark jacket, giving us the history of this one. And then moving on to Lake Jackson, Texas. There's fantastic architecture. Alden Dow was an acolyte of Frank Lloyd Wright, and he came from Michigan to start the town of Lake Jackson. So it's less than an hour away from here, almost due south, and it's full of remarkable architecture, both commercial and residential buildings. So this is us in Lake Jackson, enjoying the chance to get to see this fantastic house in near original condition. I think
and these are popular tours. I mean, you've got quite a bunch of people here, to take a bus to go out there and to join y'all. I mean, you're the only ones really doing it in our area. But I've been out there, and there's a lot of little mid-century gems, and some that we've lost, right?
Some that we've lost. But Lake Jackson hasn't grown at the same speed as Houston, so there's a chance to see things there, and they're really interested in the fact that Houstonians are coming down on buses to see the things that they take for granted. This is inside that house. That's our favorite master mod. We call our advisory board. They're celebrating her birthday with us several years ago when she was only in her mid-90s. Her name's Thessie Williams. She's the wife of the architect that Mr. McKinney showed us that house on Ivanhoe. We'll get back to that one in a minute. But that was a happy day, and she's still with us. She's just celebrated her 101st birthday just last month. So hi to Thessie if you're watching tonight. I hope so. So let's see. I think we've got another Lake Jackson. Now we're in. Does anybody know? Mr. McKinney, can I stump you yet? That's Trinity University in San Antonio. The great Texas modernist O'Neill Ford's masterpiece campus. That's Campanile and the chapel beyond. That was also a great trip. We saw mid-century houses after the tour of the campus. And now we've made it down to Corpus Christi, where we saw really, really great things as well. I think, again, that most of us hadn't seen those before, so a good chance to connect with the preservation community in Corpus. So the next slide shows a building that's undergoing adaptive reuse. This is a building by Bill Jenkins. William R. Jenkins, Houston architect, did this one in downtown Corpus in the 60s. It's called the 600 building. That's its address. And a well-known Corpus Christi architect named Walter Wisnia's son is an architect and developer based in New Orleans. Marcel Wisnia is redeveloping as a condominium tower. So it's our first look at an adaptive reuse by a Houston architect that we were fascinated to see in Corpus Christi. You see these great sunshades of cast concrete that are attached to this building. And this is a gymnasium in Corpus that just really fascinated me. That's actual structural elements that go through and over the building and out the other side. So great structural expressionism in a place where we didn't know that one. That was sort of a nice surprise to see. And can you guess, Mr. McKinney, what kind of a building this one is? This was also a great surprise to see. This is a Wisnia building, design building at Kleberg Bank. We were granted a tour both inside and outside of that building. It's a fantastic thing. Those big roof forms are also light shades inside. It's a great two-story space. A wonderful discovery. Unfortunately, the building is no longer used as a bank, and its future is endangered. So we're working to help promote an adaptive reuse for this building. Now we've made it across the border in the other direction to Shreveport, Louisiana. Here's a sort of a lowbrow homage to the Oscar Niemeyer, the Brazilian architect. This very fanciful concrete panels in front of a less fanciful office building in Shreveport, but this was sort of a roadside attraction. This is where we started our tour. So that's a fun shot of the group. We saw houses by the brothers, the Wiener brothers, done a series. They traveled in Europe and they saw the early modernism there, and they brought it back home to Shreveport, Louisiana. So we saw a series of fascinating buildings that were a great surprise. And here's an office building that was done by a local architect that everybody was fascinated by too. We literally pulled over and jumped out to catch this one because it was just very interesting from all angles. Again, nice surprises that you get when you travel together out of town. In the Fairfield building, maybe a modern, late modern, early modern building. It's also ripe for development. It's derelict now, but we enjoyed that special surprise to see this building, also in Shreveport. So making our way back to Houston, one of the things we do locally is a Mod of the Month program, where we highlight buildings, frequently residences, that may have been overlooked, or there may be a special opportunity to visit. This is a house by the Corpus Christi architect Richard Colley in Memorial. This is a fantastic interior courtyard with a giant glass pyramid over it. A really amazing house. Again, I think most of us hadn't seen it before. There's structures all over this city, and this was a great one for us to see, unfortunately demolished. This is the house that Mr. McKinney mentioned to us. It's on Ivanhoe in Afton Oaks. It's currently on the market, and this is the house that Alan Ross Williams and his wife, Thessie Williams, moved into with their young family. Lived here, and several families have been in it since. It's in great original condition. I think the next shot will show us an interior, just a sneak preview of what Mr. McKinney mentioned. You'll see the original flooring, terrazzo flooring, the brick that's both inside and outside, great dramatic wood beams, cantilever both inside and outside. This is just a detailed shot of a really great interior.
Well, and I also want to mention, so Wendy Ramirez is joining us on the show. Let's see who else is joining us. David Flores, you might know him. Alicia Silver, Marshall Lutz. I will get my pile of prizes when she comes to Holiday Market, she says, Allison, so she'll get her pile of prizes. Deborah Martin, Liz Lane, my buddy Liz Lane, she's on. She came on the bus a couple nights ago. Marty Merritt is on.
Oh, good. We'll talk about Marty.
Yeah, Marty, you're going to get your 15 minutes. We're going to get you on. Promise. Judy Glass Jordan, Marlene Graham Fleming, all these great folks. Hit the like button, please. It means the world to us. If you hit that like button, what it does for Facebook, it lets people know that, hey, this show is popular, and it starts to put it on more people's feeds. So how about that? Take a couple seconds, hit the like button. Give us a heart button. If you love Stephen Curry, give us a heart button. How about that? Okay, so we did, and dive into 4603 Ivanhoe in a little bit with that YouTube show that we talked about earlier. So here we go. Talk about this space.
So here's another Mod of the Month, also on the market. This is on one of Houston's most fascinating streets called Teal Way, on the upper edge of River Oaks. This is a house by the renowned Houston-based architectural firm McKee and Camrath. They were also Frank Lloyd Wright devotees, and so this is very much in that style. Expanded, renovated by the Kellys a few years ago. So they've been very generous with.
And there aren't many gems on Teal Way now, right? I mean, because of the flooding that's happened, there's only a handful of them now, but there used to be even also a larger handful, but still, that's a very small street that kind of curves around the bayou.
And this is one of just a couple that are left. Yeah, it's a beautiful place. So here's another great house that's special to Houston. This is the Herzog House. The Herzogs were immigrants to Houston before the war, actually, from Switzerland, and they found the Hungarian immigrant who was in Hollywood by then. His name was Paul Laszlo, better known as a designer, interior designer, maybe a set designer. And Paul Laszlo was the architect for this very remarkable house. Howard Barnstone was the local architect who associated with it. So here's a really rare concoction, a Laszlo Barnstone house that's currently listed. It's on 2 lots in Old Braeswood, right off Kirby Drive.
Oh, I love Old Braeswood. Yeah, you can see a lot of gems over there. Let's see. Oh, speaking of gems, talk about this Eugene Worling gem.
One of the questions maybe was going to be who came up with this great, simple geometric form. This is our only mid-century, public landmark. And the Meekum Fountain is a gift from John and Mary Meekum to the city of Houston. and it has been restored to its original condition, narrowly escaping a slip covering that was would have been unfortunate. But Mayor Turner was new in office, and we were able to get a hold of him and show him the value of restoring this to its original condition, rather than gilding the lily, making something out of it that it wasn't. And
what's neat is this used to be a sunken garden back in the 19-teens when 1914 of course was Herman Park, and it was a sunken garden for a while. Montrose dead end right into it, and it made it very convenient to do this. And there's a whole network of trap space underneath that people told me they've got a chance to go underneath and check it out.
So have you heard the story that a few
cars would drive into
a few drivers who really didn't have the traffic circle figured out found their way into the garden?
That's numerous newspaper accounts.
And that part of the reason for building an Audi instead of an Indy was to keep people going around and keep them safe?
Yeah, no, it was a welcome gift when John Meekum decided to do the whole complex. It actually was supposed to be a tower, never built where the Museum of Fine Arts is at now. That whole property that was supposed to, the newer building was supposed to have a variety of towers by John Meekum, in addition to the hotel and the 83 tower.
You mentioned Whirlin. It's interesting that he also did the nearby Miller Outdoor Theater.
The 1968 building.
Not the first one by William Ward Watkin, but the replacement for
not
that.
Not the 1923 one,
That's
but
right.
the 1968 one. Yeah. And he saved the columns. So a fun fact, it might even be a test question, you never know, but the columns from the original 1923 William Ward Watkin designed Miller Memorial Outdoor Theater, by Jesse Cartwright Miller. In his name is in the park, so you can kind of find him right there. They're by the Cancer Survivor Plaza. But this is a great photo, though.
Well, this is how it looks now at night, and it's still a much treasured landmark. Brides taking their pictures in front of it almost daily, unfortunately risking their lives across that traffic circle.
I love it.
But it's a great centerpiece for the park. And
so speaking of circles and domes, talk about this.
Speaking of circles and domes and things that belong to us, to you and to me and to all of us, right?
Yeah.
This is public property. This is owned by, as we know, I think Harris County owns this.
They're very proud of it. It's not the Astrodome; it's the Harris County Dome Stadium.
That's what it was originally called.
Yeah,
that's right. Before it got taken. Yeah. Yeah. So when it was certainly endangered, before it had its landmark status, there was a collaboration of local preservationists that formed. I think we can go to the next slide and see it. That formed the Save the Dome, ourastrodome.org campaign. And this is the Dome Mobile. We couldn't take the dome to people, but that last shot had Beth Wiedauer Jackson there hanging out of the truck over there on the left.
That's her,
I love that because she actually drove that thing. It's a big truck, but it was a mobile display truck. And so we went around, we asked people what the dome meant to them, and we got a lot of attention and love for it.
I just love the idea, right? I mean, how do you, it's kind of like we do with the Houston History Bus, how do you get people engaged and excited? You take it to them or you take them to it. So to be able to take a little bit of the Astrodome as a mobile, museum mobile display is really an innovative idea. And Beth, of course, is now in charge of the Astrodome Conservancy as their executive director in charge. And Minette Basil is our board president at the Heritage Society. She serves on the board as well, one of the founders with Phoebe Tudor. So just great ways to really get Houston history out there, kind of fighting the good fight. So.
Yep, there's the truck at the dome. Had to get that shot in. And there's a couple of supporters. We might remember it was only a few years ago that Prop 2 did not pass, but it's led to other great things, including the formation of the Conservancy that's continuing to work
now, talk a little about this lady over here. She has an interest. She's on your board.
Yes.
But she's one of my favorite people.
Yes. So on the left is Monica Savino, our early HoustonMod member and leader as well, and that's Anna Mod on the right. And Anna is, Anna's all over the place. I don't know where to start with Anna. I hope she's watching tonight.
I hope she's watching tonight too. But she's got the book Building Modern Houston too, which is a great book. It features a lot of modern architecture. And she's is she one of the founders of HoustonMod or one of the core members?
She certainly is. Yeah.
There you go. So we love Anna Mod, and she works closely at preserving not just mid-century items, a lot of treasures from Houston's early days.
Yeah, she's had a hand in a lot of the other things that we'll see tonight. Other adaptive reuse projects.
We're going to get on the show one day. Trust me, we're going to get her on the show.
Good,
because,
that's good.
We'd love to have her on.
That's good. And here's one more. It's a city park called Tranquility Park. It tends to get ignored with all the other things that are going on in Houston, but it can be very much a part of the park system that's downtown, immediately adjacent to City Hall. And this is a tour we did of that. That's Carrie Gelser, one of our board members, leading that tour. That's Carrie. And here's shots of some maintenance going on at the fountains of Tranquility Park, which
it doesn't get as much attention as it probably deserves. I think it's out of sight, out of mind, with all the trees built around it, of course, and just...
It's really a remarkable story.
Yeah.
Charles Tapley was both an architect and a landscape architect. Born in New Orleans, came here to go to Rice in '55. Worked for some of the great Houston firms, and this is his masterpiece. He came up with this in the '60s as a tribute to the moon landing, to Apollo 11 mission specifically.
But it took a while to get built, right?
It took almost 10 years to build it. That's right. So it was actually dedicated 10 years later for the 10th anniversary.
But not on purpose.
These things take time, and big water features are problematic. So, so in fact, there's a lot to consider here. But much of it is intact in its original condition. Those great stainless steel chimneys, some people call them sausages, are functional as vents. So there's practical aspects to it as well as some challenges to keeping that water going.
And this is why you need to stay tuned to how you can become a member of HoustonMod and learn more information about them, because this has been somewhat in jeopardy of maybe being changed. As new administrations get in their ways of maybe thinking this space isn't as valuable as it used to be, or they don't understand the space, or maybe it's too expensive in their minds to repurpose it or to fix it. Those conversations happen, but HoustonMod is a perfect example of an organization that's going to advocate and get out there, educate the public on Charles Topley's legacy, but also why this particular park is valuable and important to Houston's mid-century and architectural past. So please stay tuned for that, because we have a fight ahead of us when it comes to Tranquility Park. I don't think that it's not in danger.
Well said. Well said. So what happens to houses? People like to talk about houses when they talk about mid-century. I've got a few slides illustrating what I think we all know, but here's a house that's getting crowded out by its biggie neighbors. It probably won't be a surprise looking at this to realize that one's gone now, just because of the context of the neighborhood changed on that block. So next slide, we'll see another example of what happens. There's flooding in a nearby neighborhood. Of course, the houses on either side of that street were flooded. That's in the Braeswood-Meyerland area. And that bus driver is juggling there. He climbed out of the top of his bus to get up there, and he was stranded there for a while. And neighbors were wandering about, and those are the neighborhoods that are still figuring out what's in each of their own best interests going forward.
Allison Bell, our executive director, she lived in the Meyerland area for years and enjoyed her home there. And I think, like so many folks in Southwest Houston, they had to make a decision. Do we continue to rebuild? And I think that area of Meyerland, is just really in jeopardy of being completely erased. Because so many of those structures, and not just erased as in they're demolishing them, they're also altering them in such a way that you lose that mid-century charm. To raise a house the way they have to, is an interesting scenario. So this is another example.
There's a great mod that I don't think that one made it either. This is immediately after the flood, where all the contents of the house come out, and you've got decisions to make about going forward what to do. And then there's another one that was also suffered fire actually after the flood. So, things happen to these houses. Some of them can be restored, some of them cannot. We're not looking to save them all, but there's plenty of stock that is well worth its value yet going forward. And I think that we'll see some more examples of this.
And people don't realize these homes are 65 years old. They're in some cases 70 years old, because 50 years old rather, and and 55 years old. I mean, they're up there in time periods, because anything built in the 50s and 60s is now historic, of course. So
this was a nice flat roof modern house that someone has turned into something else, and that happens a lot too. People will take the houses and they'll put them to new uses, and they'll be unrecognizable. So this is an extreme example. So what to do about that? One thing to mention here is that the city of Houston has quite a few historic districts, almost 24. They've got a great site that you can see. The Planning and Development Department's got this on the site. You can see where they are. We won't go into those in detail, but you can see that they're finite. They're different shapes. They're different locations. The blue one there on the right in the center, closest to Mr. McKinney, is the Market Square Main Street Historic District, so it's not as residential in character as the other ones. They each have their own character. They each have their own set of guidelines. So it's a well-organized program that's come together fairly quickly. It wasn't very long ago when none of this was in place. The idea of a historic district took some doing, but now it's in place. and it's solid, and there's more applicants for historic district status.
And you
all the
serve
time.
on the commission for this organization, and like I said, they're out there. There's 22 historic districts sprinkled throughout Houston, and as you mentioned, they're all uniquely gerrymandered to be able to have the important structures that make up the parts of Houston's past. And how your time on the commission, have you had any fun stories you want to share? I mean, it's probably a challenge to be able to kind of balance things out, I guess.
It is, because they're each different. They each have their own needs. There's concern in some cases maybe that they may be inhibiting development. That we're fossilizing sections of the city. But if you imagine how many square miles there are in the Houston area, and this is only an excerpt of that, and you see that they're really, relatively speaking, like I say, they're finite. And they're specific to the character of each of those neighborhoods. We might go to the next one as a blow-up of that one there. That's Glenbrook Valley.
Speaking of challenges, this was a challenge to get it passed, right? I mean, this
It
barely
was.
passed.
It took a lot of work from neighbors who were passionate about saving their neighborhood to accomplish this. And you see that it's a strange shape, but that's okay. In fact, in this case, I say it's saddlebags. It's on either side of Broadway, a street that we've all been on Broadway from 45 going down to Hobby, right? And the city's made massive improvements to it, by the way. It ain't what it used to be either. But by saddlebagging the historic district with its contributing and in some cases non-contributing properties within, it leaves the chance for new development to come in and benefit from a stable neighborhood, where values are stable, where neighbors are proud of their neighborhood and want the new development, not in the historic district itself unless it meets the guidelines, but in terms of adjacencies, there's plenty of room.
And so fabulous 1953 Glenbrook Valley. Tell viewers out there what kind of housing stock can they find in this great space? Some gems.
You know what I highly recommend is go to the city's site and look at the application for this historic district, because I'd credit them if I knew for sure who wrote it, but it's a really well researched description of who moved into that neighborhood and why. And it was largely Italian-American families, the names that we all know that were restaurateurs and business owners, and it were major parts of the development of the city at that period of time. And they chose to move and make a neighborhood in this area. And many of them are still here. Their descendants are still here, and people have followed them there. It's a wonderful neighborhood.
Now, on the Houston Archaeological and Historical Commission, y'all focus on also saving Houston's past by offering this opportunity. Talk about Houston City Landmark status.
So there are two ways to protect a building in Houston now. One we just talked about is to be in a historic district. The other one is not this, but this is the City of Houston Landmark Program. And this this is a prestigious designation with some incentives, but this doesn't offer protection other than a 90-day waiting period for anything, for alterations or for demolition. The next one, though, is the one that I think people think of a lot when they think of this program, because it's a higher level of protection, and in fact it is the highest level of protection. So historic protected landmarks, commercial or residential, can't be modified unless it's approved by the Planning Department, the Houston Archaeological and Historic Commission, and ultimately City Council if it needs to be. So it's a big deal to make a change that's not appropriate to its designation. So that's an important step that we've taken in Houston. Those haven't been here for very long, but it's a growing program. So why does any of this matter? I want to take a second to look at this photo. No, we can go to this photo of Julia Clark. She's not an architect. She just got her license, which is why she's smiling. It's 1912. She's not a suffragette, but she's got a vision of the future. You can go to the next slide and see what she's driving there. She's just got her pilot's license. And she was just, it seems to me, incredibly brave to see the future of, in this case, the airplane. But it also meant that technology had turned a corner. And the next slide sort of spells it out. I saw this image, and it's just so amazing to me that someone took off in this kite that's got a little motor and a propeller strap to it. That's her too. And she lived. Thank you. She lived a little bit longer, and she saw a vision of the future, as Debussy did when he said, "The century of airplanes deserves its own music." I think that those pioneers saw a future that was going to be very different in the 20th century than anything that had preceded. So, rolling over to architecture, here's this guy we all know, Frank Lloyd Wright. I like this picture of him as a young man, with surrounded by three of his best-known projects. None of them are in Texas, so we won't linger on those too long. But one of his major accomplishments, besides the buildings that we probably all know something about, is the influence that he had. He lived a long time. He really had 3 long careers, and he influenced architects certainly in the States, but also all over the world. And so that was one of his major contributions, was the architects that were inspired and influenced by him. The next slide is of maybe his best preserved Usonian house, by the way. It's in Florence, Alabama. The city fathers of Florence, Alabama saw an opportunity when the Rosenbaum family, after like 60 years in this house, didn't need it anymore. The city fathers turned it into a house museum and a cultural center, and it's a real point of pride in Florence. And it's beautifully restored Usonian outside, and then the next shot we'll take a look at the inside. They've got most of the Rosenbaum family's furniture and many of their artifacts still in the house. It's a highly recommended, great example of a well-preserved Frank Lloyd Wright project. Not far away, but outside of Texas. And on the left are 2 guys that he influenced, Austrians, who came here each at slightly different times in the first half of the 20th century to work for Mr. Wright. That's Richard Neutra on the left, and Rudolf Schindler there next to him on the right. That's Schindler married a Californian. That's Pauline Schindler, his wife and child, and those are her parents, I believe, on the right. He borrowed money from his parents to hand build this house that he's leaning against there. Sort of went native when he got to California, inspired by American culture. So this is old world meets new world, and he designed this next slide, a very remarkable house. This is, Mr. McKinney, this is 1922. This house is 100 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And it's continued to inspire. And there's a quotation that's a little hard to read here. It says, Schindler designed as if there had never been houses before. It's a Rayner Banham quote. So really revolutionary, really remarkable, really celebrating American culture, and in this case, the California climate. So he's got sleeping baskets on the roof instead of bedrooms, and it's a wide open plan. But a lot of the tenets of modernism were right here at this really early stage of this unique project. And it's owned by a private foundation now, and it can be toured, and it continues to be an inspiration to a lot of people, even though it's not used as a private residence anymore. Got a few more interior shots showing just the beautiful spare geometry of the thing. And this is not Schindler's, but Neutra's. To a lot of people's surprise, this is in Texas. This is down in Brownsville in the Rio Grande Valley. This is the Krager House, done in the late 30s for an airline pilot who really knew that he wanted to live in a Neutra house. It's the only one single-family residence of Neutra's in Texas, and this is a HoustonMod trip to see the Krager House and to be able to tour it. Again, it's been through a struggle to be restored, but it's a landmark in the city of Brownsville now. They get history tourists and architectural tourists, and everybody's really glad that this house has had a happy ending, and it's being put to good use. Again, even though it's no longer a single-family residence. So that'll get us back to Texas with one more European who found his way to the States. Mies van der Rohe. This is not a Texas project. This is a model of his Crown Hall in Chicago, which is where he immigrated to. But we know him in Houston because of what he did here. Oh, first we'll look at probably his best-known project. This is the parts of the German pavilion, the Barcelona exposition, known as the Barcelona Pavilion. He did this in the late 20s, and again, very radical in its way, just as Schindler was already here in the States doing his radical home for his family. So we can take a look through these slides of the interior and the exterior. These are actually shots of the reconstruction. In the 1980s, a group of Spanish architects decided that this building was too important to not exist in the world, and they actually recreated this building. When you see color photographs like this, you know that it's the recreation, because all they had were black and white photos to work from. So, how do we get back to Texas and to Houston from Spain? This is maybe Mr. McKinney knows this one. This is on Caroline Street. This is the family home of William Ward Watkin.
Oh,
No longer extant, but he came to Houston to oversee the construction of the Rice
1909.
campus and stayed. He stayed for 40 years as professor and dean, I think until 1952 he was at Rice. So this house is no longer here, but he got great commissions, including the Julia Idison Library downtown, involved in a lot of the early Rice buildings, and this one, which we know was the original Museum of Fine Arts when it was.
And they've added the wings, the 1926 wing and the wing later on.
So the wings were added, but it was always symmetrical. It was always neoclassical. And so that's why I like to see the shot of his house prior, so you can sort of see where he was with those. And when Mies van der Rohe was hired decades later, it's very interesting that there aren't very many Mies museums at all. They're very, so we've got something really special here. But this is a shot that most people have never seen before because this was the first stage of the addition. So that curve does follow Bissonnette, but it sets way back
So
from
this
it.
is 58 or?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right, in the late 50s.
And it's 72, yeah.
And so this is the first phase of Mies's literal back-to-back addition to what William Ward Watkin did in a neoclassical way. Instead of tear that down, he found a way to use what was there and play off of it.
I drove by.
It's really fascinating.
I drove by recently, and they're doing some cleaning up and landscaping in the front in the pie shape. Of,
I saw that too.
So I think they're trying to make that more friendly, more inviting. And
But we've got something really unique here. We need to know more about the story of how that decision was made to add to that building in such a way that it's really got two faces. So later, in fact, after Mies had passed away, his firm accomplished the remainder of the master plan, which gets us to where we are now, what we know now. And by the way, I'm told that the crab is the name of that sculpture. It was there for decades. It goes back right in place after the reconstruction of the street and the new museum, the hall expansion across the street. And I just think that's the perfect place for that in relation to the building. So I was really glad to hear that that's coming back. So we're going to stay in Houston now. These are early grads, I wanted to talk about for a minute, of the University of Houston when it was a brand new program. So this is Lars Bang, a 1950 graduate of the University of Houston, and this is a collaboration he did with Lucian Hood. It's another homegrown architect, let's say, a graduate of U of H in 52. And they were sometimes collaborators, as in this building you might remember from the Rice Village area, the Times building on Bolsover, 2472 Bolsover. And sometimes they were competitors. But the next one is also something they did together. There they are, Lucian Hood and Lars Bang both signed that. That's the Big Donut. And this is a sketch that shows some version of what was built. This is actually on Bissonnette, and it's a nightclub now. It's the Marquee. The Marquee 2, the Marquee 3,
the curves are still there.
Some remnants of it. The lava rock and some of the shapes are still there. It hasn't been the Big Donut in a long time, but that was supposed to be a big helium-filled donut. So they were doing fanciful, fun things as well as serious things like museums and houses for people.
And apartment complexes too. Lots of apartment complexes.
A lot of them are still here.
Yeah.
Really richly landscaped and still in use. So this is the house. There's Lars Bang in a little fancier dress there, and this is a vintage photo of the house that he built.
Have you ever been inside this house, Stephen?
I've been inside that house.
You have?
I get to live in this house.
Well, okay, you can live in the house.
But yeah, people say, "Oh, you're an architect. You did that house." Well, that house was built 3 years before I was born, so there's not much I can say about it in its original condition. And this is a photograph from a magazine in 1954. So when we found that, my wife found the house. It was just a few years, by the way, after the Shamrock Hilton had been swung at that whole summer of '87.
Oh wow.
And I started to think about what Houston was, what it had been, maybe what it could become. And then my wife found this house, and it was all covered over in fence board and sheetrock inside, and most of these aspects of it were concealed. So I was fascinated that she was interested in it. Went and found Mr. Bang, who was still at it in his 80s, and was curious to know why I was interested in a house from so long ago. The mid-century modern thing hadn't quite happened yet. This is in the early 90s.
And
anyway,
and tell people when you came to Houston.
In the late 70s, to the
To
University of Houston, the architecture program there.
Look at that.
So
And
this
now,
is
that's
19.
not- that car that you have there is not the same one in the photo, but similar.
Well, this is
in time.
1954. So if we advance the slide, we'll go up to present day. So coincidentally, that's my wife's car. She lets me drive it. She inherited that from her dad about the same time we finished the restoration of this house. So that was in, what does that say, 2016. It was a good brick tour and was featured then. So we can take a look at some slides. But I wanted to show, this is Lars Bang's sketch. I actually colorized it to make it a little easier to read. But just briefly, without analyzing it a great deal here, you can see just at a glance that there's integration of the interior and the exterior. And he's really thought about where the landscaping is going, where that pool goes, and how it fits into the other aspects of the house. And it's got an open pavilion type effect. And the story is he was influenced by the Barcelona pavilion, as many architects of his generation were. So there were a lot of things to take out to get back down to the original materials. We covered the terrazzo flooring and re-exposed the brick, and did a lot of things. We can go through these slides. I just want people to see that these things can be done. These smaller, older houses can be insulated if they need it in ways that, when you expose all these materials, you can take paint off of brick. We can unpaint brick. Here's a guy doing that with baking soda.
Wow.
Reinstalling brick where it needs to be, repointing brick where it needs to be. And so you get back the original
please don't
effect.
paint brick, people.
Please don't paint brick.
Please don't paint brick.
Please don't paint brick. Ask us about it. We'll tell you why not. So again, down to the bones, but in order to find the vestiges of original material, so things can either be replicated, replaced, restored, as the case may be. So, here is the original effect that was intended. Again, ceiling inside, soffit outside, materials continuing on through the classic mid-century.
Now, was that
ethos
covered up as well, or what did the previous owners do with that space?
It was. They had just covered the deck. They had covered
Wow.
the deck. A lot of the wood had just been painted over and painted over and painted over. We actually found that was the original door, and so it could be repaired and reinstalled. And then we'll see some more of that as we sort of go through these original details restored.
Well, now we can see why you won a Good Brick Award. It's a lot of work goes into this.
It took time. It took work, but again, it was an exploration. You find out things when you start stripping paint. You find mostly good things. You find original materials.
So what's one surprise with the house that you found was a pleasant surprise?
I would say the short answer would be color. I thought I knew sort of what I would find, but I really didn't. And I think we'll see some of it going forward. There's a lot of bold color in this house. There's a lot of stained wood. They weren't afraid of color.
Yeah.
And so those were good surprises. Yeah, again, you can bring these things up to code. You can insulate these things. You can replace glass. Hopefully, you can do it correctly.
And what about the original homeowners? Do we know who it was built for? Who purchased the house?
They actually didn't live in it very long. We did research that, and we did meet some previous homeowners, and there's some good stories about that. But it had changed hands, not a whole lot, maybe 4 times before we found it. So there again, there's a shot from '54, and to compare it, here's what it looks like today. So again, the original surfaces have been restored. A lot of this furnishings and furniture comes from the neighborhood. We sort of collected it over time. So original details. Some of these details came out of Lucian Hood house that nearby that was unfortunately being gutted. I was able to get in and get some of those materials and put them to use here. So in a way, this is a collaboration between Bang and Hood and me. That's what I like to think of it.
There you go.
So more detailed shots.
Wow.
And that's, again, what it was, 1954 on the upper left-hand corner. There we are now. We're doing okay on time.
They're good.
Okay. And very nearby, but long ago, next shot, is House by Lucian Hood. And it's just like seeing these side by side because both of these were sort of houses that had been forgotten. For all the punch that each of them had by young architects who were really right out of school, this is a construction photo they got from the original owner of this house. This house was recently on the market. No one had seen it in decades, so it had been well cared for, but it had just been kept by people who were very private about it. So by going on the market, people were able to see it in many cases for the first time. It's a spectacular house. It's about 3,000 square feet, so, maybe small by contemporary standards, but it's a great house too. So it's in this shape now. That's a happy story to it too, and we hope it'll be there a long time. This is another one. I just wanted to mention this is the 50s generated all kinds of things. This maybe isn't everybody's cup of tea, but there was something about this that I learned to really appreciate. It's this wall of rock, this sort of laid up as it was, these Polynesian style, I guess, heavy timbers, open rafters. I mean, this thing had a lot of funk, and I was rooting for it, but those rocks are on the ground now, so that house didn't make it.
Well, this fun 1950 gem. Talk about this.
So this is by the enigmatic Mr. Moss. Arthur Moss did a few projects. This one is owned by the retailers Cool Linscomb, and they're using it for storage now. We're hoping for good things here. But a lot of people love this. It's a lot of people's favorite mid-century house, and that just captures the detail of the geometry. Maybe more remarkable from the outside than the inside. This is a masterpiece by the Houston architect Howard Barnstone. This is the Owsley House. It's right on the bayou. It has flooded, pre-Harvey certainly, and so it's in structurally great condition. We talked about this in the Barnstone book that was recently released.
And then there's fun little commercial treasures all throughout, including in Southwest Houston. Talk about this space.
Do you know this one? This is late 60s, I think 67. This is done by William Jenkins and his firm in a later state than the one we saw in Corpus. So this is the Hillcroft Professional Building. I think the next slide shows some of the detail of it. Some people would call this brutalism, but it's got a rhythm to it. Again, it's got a geometry. It's got cantilevers on all four sides. It's just a very interesting building. Still in use as an office building. It needs some love, but it's structurally strong, still intact. And it's unique to Houston, just like that Penguin Arms apartment building that we saw. Here's another unique one, New House in Taylor, when there was a series of these things going up. Your tour bus might go by this one. South of downtown. It's still being used as an office building on Fannin. Yeah. 1960. I mean, this is a very unique, special building. They're not building buildings like this anymore. So.
Well, and these are in jeopardy, not just all around Houston, but also like Richmond area has a lot of these too. That
could have shown several good ones from the Richmond area. There was a little group where Gerald Hines was learning his trade, and this is one by the also enigmatic Houston architect Joseph Krakauer. With his designer Herb Green, they did this great building. A lot of people sort of, it's mysterious and interesting in ways that.
And I think at one point a tire company had it, right? And they painted the black as tread, which is kind of neat. So now it's brown.
And Jim Parsons and I did a little research, and Jim from Preservation Houston, and found details. There's details that have been lost besides all the paint. There's mosaic details that were on some of those teeth that are gone now. Jim took this shot. This is the. Church just also south of downtown, the First Church of Christ Scientist,
which is now the Spire nightclub.
So now I'm going to enter a short description of adaptive reuse buildings. This is one that's turned into a nightclub just in time for the Super Bowl a few years ago.
This
is, we can go on to the next one. This is the Melrose building, which was the first international style building, 21 stories. So it's a little building by contemporary standards. So what do we do with a building like that? Well, the next slide shows that with some vision and foresight and some help from Anamod, yes, in this case, as a consultant on the project, it's now adaptively reused as Le Meridien. It's got a great restaurant in the lobby. It's got a great rooftop lounge called Hogbirds on top. So that one's still with us. And then maybe this is
Speaking of hotels.
This is a good one to end on. This is the Medical Towers building. It's our version of the Lever House, which is a really influential New York project. So here we are in the medical center in the 50s. I like this one because it shows it sort of all by itself. This is a rendering, so it might not be completely accurate. It looks like a photo, doesn't it? A postcard photo.
Yeah. But it's still.
So the medical center that we know now wasn't there yet. And there's this heroic building, but as a medical office building, it had seen better days. And look what can happen to it with some vision.
Shout out to
some effort.
Pearl Hospitality, because they actually did the 1910 Carter building. They
That's right.
That.
Totally different kind of a building, right?
Yeah, totally different. But they did that, and then they just got the Battlesteins building next door, and they're going to redo that as an annex to their building. And of course, they did this in between. So Arch and his team.
I don't know if you had a chance to tour it earlier this year.
Yeah.
You were there. I saw you there. Minette and I were there with the group. But I mean, unfortunately, it opened in February, just before the pandemic hit. But I strongly encourage people to see this thing because it enlivens the block for the neighborhood across the street as well as for the medical center. It's a great success.
And we want to support projects like this with our dollars and with our, folks that come in out of town, because that's how we show that these kind of projects are meaningful, they're worth it, and it encourages more people to take those kind of leaps, because the tax credits, that's a whole separate conversation that Anna Mod will probably have one day, but the tax credits that are offered out there, but support folks that support history like this, because it'll just keep us going with more of these treasures saved.
And it's not just us, it's people from out of town who are going to stay in these hotels. Yeah. You and I might visit, but the people who come from out of town really appreciate seeing something that's authentic to Houston. Yeah. And you get that in a hotel like this Westin or downtown the Meridian.
Absolutely.
So those are priceless.
Those are priceless. Well, and speaking of priceless, becoming a member of HoustonMod, you get priceless information about our city's past. Talk real quick about being a member of your organization.
Sure, it's an easy thing to do. I'd say that however much you participate in any of these programs or events or tours, you get on our mailing list, so we can keep you updated about what's going on. We share information, like I said, with the other organizations. So it's a great way to stay up to date with what's going on all around the city and beyond. And it's easy to do. Our website's got, this is our brochure, but our website's got a place to do that. It's $35 for individual memberships, $50 for families, and benefactor levels if you can beyond that. But we're all volunteer, not for profit, and we appreciate the support.
There you go. Hey, Jean Deal, thanks for work. Jean Deal just said she worked in the medical tower building, so there you go. How about that? Okay, I want to say a little shout out to her because she's one of our best folks that answer questions. Right. Speaking of questions, let's go ahead and do that real quick. So you got questions. You get 5 questions about the talk that we just had. And they have to be something we said in the talk, so I'll kind of be the ref on that.
They have to be, huh?
Yeah, they have to be, yeah, because, people that pay attention, make sure they saw that. So, question number 1, Stephen Curry, what is your question number 1 for the audience members out there?
Well, let's see who could name the architect who designed both the Miller Outdoor Theater and Meekum Fountain.
Okay, we need the first and last name, or just last name of the architect that designed, we mentioned it earlier, we talked about the 1923 Miller Memorial Theater, and the 1968 Miller Outdoor Theater,
that's right,
and the 1965 John Meekum Fountain.
That's right. Yeah, that's 60s.
So there you go. Who was that architect? Okay, that's going to be, and are people chiming in? Oh, they're getting there. Okay, Teresa Wines just joined us. Sonia Patty Lopez joined us. Great. So again, who was the architect that Stephen Curry mentioned earlier? Who was the architect behind? Really, he first talked about the John Meekum Fountain, and then later we talked about the 1968 apron that is inside the Miller Outdoor Theater building. So 2 clues. Okay. Second question.
Well, how many times has the Museum of Fine Arts Houston been expanded?
Okay. How many times has the Museum of Fine Arts building been expanded? We talked about the original building. The ones that we talked about building
on the original block.
On the original block, okay? Yeah. It's a hard question because they keep expanding all over the place.
That's right.
But we did discuss it, and it might be a number. The number might be one more time than we talked about because I can remember they did something else to it. But we did talk about the number of times it was, and I guess you guys can figure that out. Okay, we'll take a variety of answers for that one. Okay, people are chiming in. Good job, people. Marcia, Sharon, Marty's chiming in too. We're not going to say if you got it right or not, but you're chiming in, and it's all times. So when you answer the question, we know who got it right by the time they said it. Okay, third question. What is it?
What's the name of the truck representing the Astrodome that made its way across the city during the Prop 2 campaign?
That's going to be a little hard. So what is the name of the truck that traveled around the city during the Prop 2 proposition about the Astrodome? Okay? What is the name of the truck? And I guess we'll let Steve Curry, our guest, ref on some of those. Okay, so that's question number 3. Question number 4.
Well, I'm looking at these images, thinking about the things we've just talked about. I might ask, who's?
We got to do that partnership, right?
Right.
Is there one question we can ask about that partnership?
So an easy question might be, who are Houston's best known?
That's good.
Frank Lloyd Wright influenced architects.
Okay.
They didn't start that way, by the way. They started off as traditionalists, but that's the way they went as the century progressed.
One loved tennis, so that's a clue right there.
And one was a big tennis player.
Big buddies with George Mitchell.
Yeah.
So there you go. So ask the question again so I can hear it again, or say the question again.
So which architectural firm from Houston-based firm is best known as Frank Lloyd Wright devotees, acolyte, influenced by?
2 architects, 4 names technically, but 2 names we'll accept. The last names, you can do that right now. Here's a clue, by the way, what this is. We lost this treasure. I'm not going to say what it is. We lost this, treasure a little, 3 years ago or so. So that's a little clue. Okay. All right. Fifth and final question.
Well, I'll go ahead and ask for the names of the 2 early graduates from the University of Houston College of Architecture that were both competitors, collaborators at various stages of their career.
Competitors, collaborators, and including a collaboration with Stephen Curry on one of his projects that he talked about. So that gives you a little more of a question. Go.
I said we take last names.
We can take last names. That's easier, yeah. So we'll take last names. We'll accept both of them. Okay, that's it. Let's once again thank our awesome special guest on the show, Stephen F. Curry with HoustonMod, for sharing his knowledge with us. Absolute pleasure. And you can learn more about HoustonMod where?
At our website, HoustonMod.org.
There you go. And on social media, make sure you follow and like them. I think they got some really great photos there about that as well. And I think that's pretty much. Lastly, I want to always thank you for chiming in. A big thank you to you. We appreciate you every single Wednesday. Again, next Wednesday, November 11th. The season ends November 18th. We'll be with 2 more speakers, Priscilla T. Graham, and then, of course, we mentioned Doug Weisskopf earlier about the book Trails Around Houston. So 2 more shows left at the end of our season. Thank you to Alana, to Isaac, to Kian, to Kai, to Harrison Funches as well, and of course always to Allison Ayers-Bell, the Hairstyle Executive Director, and of course Manette Basel, our Board President. Okay, well, good night. Thank you guys. Take care. We'll see you.